that, I'm welcoming our first new newsmaker on Mirror Now today, Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, now joining us. Mr. Tharoor, thank you very much. I'm, of course, going to start with Parliament, where the Jaya Bachchan versus Jagdeep Dhankar controversy has honestly left me scratching my head. Two people in Parliament have a disagreement, and the opposition is actually mulling an impeachment. I mean, isn't that what would qualify as a disproportionate response, to say the least?
I think you're referring to what happened in the Rajya Sabha, not the Lok Sabha. And that's therefore something I can't speak with any first-hand knowledge of because we are confined to our own chambers. What I understand from friends in the Rajya Sabha is that there was an accretion of incidents and that their overall objection was the tone and manner of the presiding officer repeatedly over a period of time, and not just months, but really much more than that. And this is why they were mulling such a drastic step. I agree with you, it is a drastic step. But when the opposition feels repeatedly that it's treated unfairly and even rudely, then you can certainly imagine the case for this kind of measure.
But where was Mr. Dhankar rude? All of us have seen the exchange. I mean, tempers are flying, yes, but where was the rudeness?
Look, as I say, since I'm not sitting in the Rajya Sabha and I don't have a first-hand flavor of it, you should ask one of our Rajya Sabha MPs.
Mr. Tharoor, the other issue that has raised tempers in Parliament is, of course, amendments to the Waqf Act. What exactly is the opposition's problem with it? How is this anti-Muslim? Because the government says this is simply reforms.
The entire sort of Article 25 to 30 range of protections the Constitution gives us all to practice our own religions the way in which we want. And frankly, these are issues which I can understand the feeling. We have, after all, in Kerala, I can tell you, we have what's called Devaswam boards to manage our temples. And we don't allow MLAs who are not Hindu to be elected to oversee the Devaswam boards. The same logic should apply to the Waqf boards. This is Muslim charity. Why should non-Muslims be appointed? Why do we have a specific requirement in the bill that two non-Muslims should be amongst those appointed in the Waqf Board Council? Then on top of that, you've got this this problem that some of the Waqf boards run madrasas. And there is an article, Article 30, which entitles religious minorities to establish and administer their own educational institutions. Now, if you essentially give the district collector unilateral power to take over a Waqf property and say it's government property, which is what the bill wants to propose, then even the madrasas attached to that suddenly become the responsibility of the government. Is the government going to be running religious schools now? I mean, there are very many questions of this nature which we felt needed further thought, and that's the whole idea of actually getting this bill referred to a committee of Parliament where a number of MPs from a number of parties can raise all these issues, perhaps receive assurances, give a report, some suggestions, and then we can see whether this bill should come back in that shape or form.
Let me just prod you on the issue of district magistrates now having the power to intervene. Look, the Waqf Board has a peculiar habit of waking up in the morning and claiming whatever property they fancy as their own. They have a history of doing that. Now, if I, as a complainant, need to go and complain about this, who do I complain to? The Waqf Board. Essentially, they are the chore, they are the police. They are the accused, they are the judge. Isn't that arbitrary? So when the amendments are looking at doing away with this arbitrariness by making the DM the person who, who a complainant will go to, what's the problem in that?
They've done this at least once before that I remember, which is that on the data protection bill, which would normally have been referred to my committee, the committee I was chairing in those days, the IT committee, but instead they referred it to a select committee, which under the rules of Parliament is then chaired by the BJP and has a majority of BJP MPs. So ultimately the government would get its way. And I'm afraid that's also true if it's a select committee in this case rather than a standing committee. It wasn't entirely clear to me which of the two was the formula, but if it's going to be a select committee for this particular issue, it will again be chaired by the BJP. The only one difference from the previous parliament is that the majority of the BJP is not that absolute. And they can't steamroll things. And since some of their allies will also be present, and we did see that a couple of their allies were less than fully enthusiastic about their bill, it's possible that the committee may also reflect a composition that's a little more fair-minded. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. One of the most important aspects of parliamentary consideration is that at least various points of view can be taken into account in the report that will then come, and that report becomes a document submitted to Parliament that when we are finally debating the bill itself, it'll be before us. And any of the significant suggestions made by that committee, even if they were rejected by a majority, and as I said, it'll be a narrow majority now for the BJP, not an overwhelming one, I think we should be able to have a pretty good conversation about that in Parliament. One of the whole things about legislation, Shreya, is that it needs thorough ventilation. The problem with the previous parliaments of the Modi government is that only 14 or 15% of all the bills were even referred to a committee, and most bills were then steamrollered through the main parliament. You actually had a situation where not a single bill actually had any modification made as a result of parliamentary discussion. Now, that's not at all democratic, and at least in this parliament, with the changed numbers, we're hoping we will have a more democratic approach to the whole process of lawmaking.
Talking of democracies, can I just draw your attention now to Bangladesh? I had the opportunity to interview Sheikh Hasina's son, Joy, who's telling me that contrary to media reports, his mother has not applied for asylum anywhere. She has not applied to the UK, not to Finland, not to the US, not to India. He says she wants to go back. What are the chances of that happening? Still a big question. Does it mean that Sheikh Hasina then stays in India for good? And could there be repercussions for India if that happens?
But that's in any case the case. I mean, you know, we have stood by her as a friend and welcomed her to our home, as it were. You don't call a guest into your house and then start asking when you're leaving. I think we will leave it to her to judge when she feels it's right to move and where she wants to move to. That would be the responsible attitude on the part of India. Look, if you don't stand by your friends, then no one will become your friend in future. That's common sense in human relationships and also in national relationships. Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina has been very friendly to India on matters that have really been relevant to us, including issues like national security concerns about some of the insurgent and would-be terrorist groups that earlier used to seek refuge in Bangladesh and have no longer found any tolerance for their activities in that country. So we have every reason to be grateful to the outgoing Prime Minister. And so now that she's with us, my own view is we should be hospitable, keep her safe as well, and then see when she wants to leave. She may wish to leave in her own interest because, at least in the short term, her security would be safer farther away from her own country than in a neighboring country like ours, and that's a call only she can make.
I asked you this question in the backdrop of Khaleda Zia saying that it will be difficult to do business with India if India continues to harbor Sheikh Hasina. Mohammad Yunus is on record to say that India needs to pick. Do you want to build a relationship with the Bangladeshi people or one individual? I asked you the question in that context.
I would agree entirely with that last proposition. As you probably know, Shreya, I've been talking to the media outside Parliament during the unfolding of this crisis. And my line has been very, very clear. We should stand with the people of Bangladesh. That's our first and foremost obligation. Secondly, of course, with Bangladesh as a country, a government, a state, because it is a neighboring country. And only thirdly, with any individual office holder, prime minister, leader, whatever. That is a very clear set of priorities that any government would normally have. And that certainly would be my priorities. Having said that, there are decencies also in human relations. And I don't think that it would be at all fitting for India to make Sheikh Hasina, after all that she's done as a friendly neighboring prime minister, feel unwelcome. The time may come when it really starts affecting our relationship with a neighboring country. And at that point, she herself, I'm sure, will realize that the time has come to move on. But if not, I would rather she took the decision on the basis of her own sense of what is best for her and, of course, for her own safety.
My final question to you is about Shreejesh. He comes from Kerala, and we'll probably have to enlist your support to try and convince him not to retire.
What a hero. I mean, I must say that he's been the pride of India, not just of Kerala. And I have to say that as far as Shreejesh is concerned, he was the sort of rock around which the team was built. He and Harmanpreet as the guy who would rush forward and score those goals. Those two, I think, were the stars from the Indian sports fans' perspective. Obviously, the entire team held together and was able to take us to the bronze. I think the match against Germany was a big disappointment, because if they had made that through, they could have even won the gold. They really were amongst the best teams we've put out in recent years. And I think the message the team wants to give us all, and that will continue even with Shreejesh's departure, because he's insisting, as you know, on maintaining his retirement. The message is, look, Indian hockey is back. Stay with us, support us. And that's something that all sports fans in India should do. We should support the team now, give them our attention, give them our good wishes, for the very good reason that we were in the doldrums for a long, long time. And if it weren't for the sort of fluke victory in 1980 Moscow, when half the strong sides of the time were boycotting the Olympics, we really haven't been a force to reckon with and in international competition generally, and in the Olympics in particular, for a very long time. So this has been a morale booster in what's otherwise been a very disappointing Olympics for us.
We'll leave it there for the moment, Mr. Tharoor. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. There's much more coming up on the other side.